Hello. Who knows how to make the projector work? Anyone? I was just asking who knows how to make the projector work. I would say this is the first time I use this. I tried those last ones to find it. Hello. Good afternoon. Nothing? Anyone out there? Yes. Okay, good. Chris back there hears me as well. Just everyone else in front is asleep or too busy. I know I didn't send an email recently, so you shouldn't be looking at your email right now. Unless you're filling out the wiki page. Who has not filled out the wiki page? Who actually paid attention to what I'm saying? No one.
Who hasn't filled out the wiki page because you're not a working group chair? Awesome. Okay, thank you for coming, even though you're not absolutely 100% required to. So the bad news is you're going to hear some jokes until we get the slides projected. The good news is they don't have to come from me, which is to say, please hold on, technical difficulties.
So two guys walk into a bar.
I think the entire population of the room is working group chairs. I think this is just a repetition of the working group chairs meeting for routing area.
Okay, so this is the routing area open meeting. I'm Alvaro, this is Aaliyah, and that's Deborah, and we have a very exciting meeting planned for today. Of course we do. What do you mean? Here we go. Yeah, we're showing something. Okay, so so the agenda for today is, the usual agenda. We're going to go through some of the trivia on the area, what has changed, which isn't really much, and we're going to have a presentation by Rick Taylor, who's sitting over there. He's going to talk about DLAP. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a second. The Notewell is up. I'm sure you all know it by heart, but read it anyways again. And then after Rick's presentation, we're going to go into the always exciting and never boring reports from every working group. First, we're going to have John give us a quick report of the routing directorate. And then we should have a little bit of time for any open mic questions or any other discussions that you want to have. Anyone have any items that you want to change the agenda for? Nope.
So there's a shockingly low number of people here.
There's a shocking what?
There's a shockingly low number of people here. I'm wondering about the question you asked. How many people are working group chairs versus not? This is sad.
So, no, that's a really good point, Chris. So how many people here are working group chairs? How many people here are not working group chairs?
I'm a working group chair from a different area.
You still count. It's
no,
okay.
So
Right,
that,
how many are here for the first time? How many is this their first IETF? Or thank you very much for coming. You're really welcome.
so
Awesome.
The cross-pollination is actually really useful, even if you're working group chair from another area. But wow.
I do see some people trickling in now, which might indicate that we're not as exciting as the snacks, which is okay. But thank you for coming. Sorry, Alvaro and Deborah are, of course, more exciting than the snacks, as Alvaro has pointed out. He's sweet.
We told you, you're going to hear bad jokes. Well, they're the realities. What do you want? So you read the note well. There's also a bunch of links of other resources that you all should know, the Routing Directorate page, the wiki, etc. And as always, please, especially those of you who are not chairs, of course also as well, but please review the documents in the working group. That helps everyone satisfy the mission that we're here to fulfill in the IETF, to create really good standards, document all these standards. Please review the documents, make comments, ask questions, anything else you want to do. And also, as always, we're open to any of your feedback. If you want to use the time in the open mic session, please use that to give us any feedback about what we're doing good or bad or different or anything you want to say. Or if you want to look for us outside individually, as a group, whatever, please give us feedback. This is one of the only opportunities, only places that we actually do get feedback from.
I mean, just to amplify on that, I at least get shockingly little feedback from anybody who's not a chair about anything that's not their working group. And sometimes we try and have discussions in the routing area meeting because it is a good and open forum where we can have discussions both on how the area is doing and where we should be going. The industry is changing, right? And that has impact on the IETF and the technologies we should be pulling in and how we should be interacting out into other communities. And if we don't have those discussions here, then it's very hard to have a coherent guidance for where the area is going.
So what I was thinking when I was thinking about how the lack of people was, we're always having this hard time finding a time to meet sort of privately as a group of working group chairs, right? And is it possible maybe we could combine these two things, which with the benefit of like having a working group chairs, having this be like the same thing we do at the working group chairs meeting, but with an open forum, right? Like, somehow combining those two things, maybe that would help get other people interested in what we're doing.
Yeah, we can do that. There are some topics, and you know this, that other times we've had similar topics that we have in our chairs meeting. We have them here as well. We discuss Yang and other topics other times. This time we had, just all of you know, so that all of you know, we had the security ADs come to the routing chairs meeting. Of course, we scheduled it at 7:30 in the morning because there was no other time to get the security ADs anywhere, including this time. Yes, I think that there are some topics that are probably okay, or they're fine for everyone to discuss in a more open way. Not that that topic wasn't, but timing and other things limit some of the things that we can do.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm thinking like, is there really anything? I mean, there's times where you want to meet where you need to discuss things in a semi-private forum, right? But I wonder if, to err on the side of openness, and there's not really that many things that we would be discussing that are private, right? So we might think about trying to combine the two concepts, because then we actually have a meeting time.
Tal Mizrahi, just for the sake of the remote participants, let's start by saying our names when we come to the mic. Thanks.
Okay, can someone please close the door? Thank you. So this is the agenda. As I said, we go through the area status. Not that much has changed. Rick's going to talk about DLAP, then the reports, and then we can go back to any other thing. So as I just said, there hasn't been really any changes to the area. We have no new working group or anything was rechartered, or we haven't closed anything. We, I think, are close to finishing work on some of the working groups, and then it should be time to close or recharter. Think about what's next. We did have a BOF this week, which was yesterday. Yesterday morning. Yes. The DC routing BOF, and we're going to hear, as part of the reports, we're going to hear from them as well, and then we're going to figure out what to do following what we got out of there. And there have been no chair changes in the last 3 months. We're always looking to, of course, enhance and make the leadership better, including our own jobs, right? So please be on the lookout of people and give opportunities to people who can grow and be chairs, ADs, anything else.
So, yeah, to that point, shepherds, I know that a number of my working groups, the chairs, I've been encouraging to go to ask for shepherds on the mailing list, to have folks spend a few cycles to understand and help with that process so that they see how it works. And then that helps them understand how their documents are going to go through. And it helps show that the documents that are moving through the working group have interest from more than the authors. And it's important to have all of these types of feedback. The chairs get pretty busy as well. As to amplify on some of what Alvaro said, I've been upfront in the working groups, and my expectation is that before I step down, though probably regrettably not right at the plenary, I do expect that I'll be closing Trill. We're working on getting the work done. I2RS is going to go on hiatus and getting that work that's still stuck in that working group finishing up. I know Sue and Russ have been working very hard on making that happen. I really appreciate that work, primarily Sue, of course, for that. And as we discussed in the joint OSPF-ISIS session, I expect to be merging those two working groups. We're also working on rechartering SFC and so on.
And one item we forgot to put here, and Leah just mentioned, she referred to as stepping down. I would say she's moving on to maybe better things, hopefully. And hopefully, even though we'd like to keep her forever, we can't. So right now, NOMCOM has the comment period open. It's only open, I think, to like the Thursday or Friday of our Thanksgiving week. So it's really critical. We have a good group of slate of candidates there. So be sure to get your comments in. You can do it either individually, or if you want to do something private, you can just send it off to the chair, say keep it private. You know, they have to just make sure you try to do that in the next week or week and a half.
So not to put anybody on the spot, but does everybody know who the candidates for the next routing AD are? Okay, so could those people who have been kind enough to don't volunteer to serve the next 2 years of their lives for the IETF, please stand up so everyone knows who you are. And if you have people have questions or want to check with you, that would be really appreciated. Thank you. Thank you for volunteering. It really matters, and I deeply appreciate it.
The only other thing that I want to say regarding the non-com is you can give feedback about the candidates, you know, why you think someone's going to be good or not. Or you can also give the non-com feedback about what you think is needed in the area. So they can, you know, talk to the candidates and find what you think is missing or what we're going to be missing if LES steps down or when LES steps down, etc. Again, the feedback period is open until the end of next week. Just a reminder, these are the working groups that we're responsible for. Aliyah already mentioned some of the working groups that she's working on rechartering or closing. We're going to have today, after this meeting, the Manet meeting, we're going to have a serious discussion there about what the future of the working group is. We're close to rechartering spring as well, so there was a lot of activity this week, but we need to figure out what's next for that group as well. Okay, so now we're going to move into Rick's DLAP presentation. So Rick has been active in the Manet working group, and one of the protocols that the working group has been doing there is called DLAP, Dynamic Link Exchange Protocol. We believe that, or the reason that Rick is here to talk about it is that we believe that the applicability of DLAP goes way beyond Manet networks. I mean, it was initially developed to satisfy some of the needs there because of how the networks are built. But in reality, we believe that the applicability goes beyond that. So what we want to do here is give you a glimpse of what DLAP is to try and whet your appetite. And there is development going on right now, extensions going on, but we want to get more people interested. And both coming to the Manet working group, but also working on DLAP specifically. That's the objective of this talk.
I'm going to hold the mic because I'm taller than the mic stand and I know you have to keep it close. So if I deviate, you can't hear me. Somebody just wave. Okay, so yeah, DLAP. What is it? Why should I care? As Alvaro pointed out, it's work we've been doing in the Manet working group for the last 6 years. This has taken a long time Um, and the problem we've been trying to solve is how do you do routing in dynamic networks of radio bearers? I'll go into a bit more detail about that in a second. But again, I'm repeating Alvaro here. We think we have a solution that has wider applicability than just the MANA problem cases. But what I'm going to do is talk through how we came to this decision for the MANA use cases and then try and convince you that it's got applicability outside of MANA. So first off, what's the problem? Very simple. How do two routers form and maintain an adjacency? I mean, how does router A discover router B in order to start exchanging routes? Well, it's pretty obvious. You configure each router with what the guy on the other end's IP address is or something along that type. You start sending packets, hello. And you keep sending them at a configured retry interval, and at a certain point, the guy on the other end says, hello, back. And then you can start sharing routes. And once that's up, you make sure that your protocol has some kind of, I'll send a hello, I'm still here message, a keep alive. And when you stop hearing them from the guy at the other end, you assume he's gone and probably tear those routes down or go and do something else. Okay, and that works. That works fine. We've been building routing protocols on this sort of principle for, 25, 30 years? Someone will tell me it's longer. And it works fine when your network looks like that. And I wish my data centers looked like that. And it hopefully works when your server racks look like that. But occasionally people pull cables out and you know how it works. And it very rarely works well when your network equipment is made of these things. This is actually a very nice radio. I'd like to point out there's nothing wrong with the radio. The problem is with the approach to routing over such kit. Okay? If anyone from Harris is listening. Why is it so bad across these radio systems? Well, it's because radios are affected by things that wires aren't. Rain has a major problem. You don't get that in data centers. When it rains in data centers, nobody really cares as long as the roof's not leaking. Interference, we all know this from Wi-Fi. When your channel is congested, somehow you just can't get that connection you want. Position and orientation. Mountains are important. If somebody walks over and moves your satellite dish or leans on it, then guess what? You've just lost your link. And also, frankly, radio equipment is commonly used in things that move. If it doesn't move, you're better off using a wire, really. Enough experience in this field. If your kit isn't moving, use a wire. Okay, so a little bit of a digression. Fundamentally, IP has won. Well done, us. Everyone wants to run IP across their radio networks because it works across all their office equipment and everyone can see the benefit of it. So why do they have to have a special system to run across the radio networks? So the market is demanding an IP Ethernet interface into the front end of the radio. They can then assume this traffic magically works across the radio network, comes out the other end and can route off to your ISP of choice and your service providers, and you can book your holidays and do whatever you need to do. To manage that, that means the radio layers have got really clever. To be able to manage multiple. Look how complex 802.11 is. It does some pretty clever stuff, and your access points, although they seem such commodity hardware, are doing some clever stuff here. And the nice thing is, because we're sort of stopping at the IP layer, vendors can then innovate and do their own special sources and come up with their own clever radios that work for use cases where there might be customers and the traditional kit doesn't work well, which is all good. Competition and innovation. And when I talk about radios these days aren't that point-to-point thing you used to see in old war films from the 1940s. They're complicated satellite systems, meshing radio systems that are designed to work in places like downtown Manhattan. Free space optical and microwave systems, which have multi-gigabit connections running hundreds of kilometers or thousands if you're higher up in the atmosphere. So the proposition that DLEP, the MANA working group came to, is that when you're dealing with links more complicated than wires, and I'll read this out because I think it's valid, the link layer is already doing discovery and maintenance. It's already doing that clever stuff. So why is the routing layer doing it again? Why send hellos when your radio kit's already doing it? Why don't you just talk to the radio and say, hey, what are you doing? And so this could be summed up by the work that's happened in MANE over the years. The earliest date was 2007, which is radio to router protocols. How does a router talk in a consistent, standardized way to a radio to find out what are you doing, what's going on at the link there, to save me having to duplicate that effort. So there's a little bit of background. First off, there was PPP over E for credit flow and link metrics, which is doing it over the point-to-point connections over Ethernet. Then R2CP, which was another attempt at this, building on the shortcomings of PPP over E. And that consolidated into Dynamic Link Exchange Protocol, which was really the next generation, learning from the experiences with the previous ones. You can see some of these drafts only had one revision. DLEP started 2012, went through a number of iterations as we learned, and it really was a case of running code and rough consensus. So a lot of experimentation work went into this, working out what actually needs to be in, what can we leave out in order to get a basic protocol that performs the tasks we need it to without spending another 6 years trying to get this standardized. So it was painful but worth it. So what is DLEP? Obviously, you can read the RFC, but I'll condense it very quickly into this slide. So as I said before, it's a protocol that allows a router and a radio to have a conversation about what is going on at the link layer. So fundamentally, your lower layers can tell a router, hey, I've just found someone. I've found another node on the network. You know, he's tuned to my channel. He's in my TDMA time slots plan and so on. I've done a load of layer 2 stuff, and now you can talk to him and can tell you stuff like, this is his MAC address. If you send me frames with this MAC address, guess what? They'll pop out at the guy at the other end. If possible, I'll provide you the IP address as well. And also, I can handle multicast. If I'm a radio system that does multicast, I can talk to you about multicast availability. And also, having told you that the link is there, I can tell you, A, when it goes away again, and B, I can tell you about what the quality of that link is like. So what bandwidth can you get? What latency is like across that link? And some other things like, you know, it's a bit of a catch-all went in there. So what sort of battery life has the thing on the other end got? So, you know, do I really want to elect him in some sort of routing protocol that uses elections for designated peers or something? Do I want to elect this guy if his battery's just about to die? And it will tell you how those links change over time. So it may say, yeah, you got a 100 meg link. Oh, it's 50 meg now. Oh, 25, it's getting worse. He's probably driving away from you, or a thunderstorm's coming in, or whatever. And obviously it can tell you when it gets better. So you can start to make more real-time decisions about what you're doing. So how does this help? Well, if the link layer can tell you when things happen, then you can start to operate in an event-triggered way, rather than polling for availability of things you might want to form an adjacency to. You can be told, meaning you can be more responsive, and particularly in things like low-powered devices, you can save on resources and concentrate on what you're meant to be doing, i.e. talking to the other people you can see. So, summed up by that slide quite nicely, I hope. And the other thing you can do is, if you know about those links and you are told about how those links change, you might be able to do smarter things, such as if I know my latency is 200 milliseconds, then I know I have to wait 400 milliseconds before I'll get an ACK back. So I can make a smarter decision about my timers. And I can also change my decision about my timers as I spot that latency getting longer or shorter or whatever. So I'm not flooding what could be a valuable, expensive to use link with control plane packets. And you can then go on and play some other games like, oh, well, if I know that link's actually not got particularly great bandwidth, I might not want to use it. So you could do some metric-based costs. And that's something we're only just starting to open up. So, okay, nice example. Needed a picture of airplanes. I work for Airbus. We make airplanes. We also make networks. So a classic example we have is that an aircraft can take approximately 45 seconds to fly from horizon to horizon. So how on earth do you get the data off to the poor guy on the ground or pick up his data? Well, during that time, first off, you've got to notice that he's there. Then the link layer's got to do its chatting about let's assume we're tuned to the right channel. Let's try and sort out our TDMA or our CDMA and all this clever RF stuff that they do. And once that's in place, the IP layer has got to come up and go, oh, okay, let's do some ARPing. Let's see if we, or some neighbor discovery. Oh, I found him now. I've got some addresses. Great. Now, perhaps if I'm a router involved in this, I want to start saying, hey, routing protocols. Now you want to kick off. And if they're doing hellos, this is taking longer. And at that point, the application layer might notice and want to start syncing the data. And at that point, you've gone. It's all just dropped. So breaking that down a bit, ARPs are kicking off. OSPF, the common practice, as far as I can work out for OSPF, is a 10-second hello and a 40-second dead interval. Well, in a 45-second window, you've lost half your time trying to work out whether he's even there. And your upper layer protocols, we all know these application guys. I used to be one. You test on your dev machine, which is running on gigabit Ethernet in the office and probably goes via a little switch under your desk. Oh, it works great on my machine. You start to run this in the field, and it never works. So, obviously, yeah, you can tune all these parameters. And yeah, that's what we do at the moment. We all go and stand around in a wet field, and it takes a very long time, and it's all very expensive. But we do tune the parameters, and we can get these networks to work. But there's no dynamism in there at all. What will work for one mission in a nice sunny day, as soon as it starts raining, it's all got to be retuned. So there's a lot of fudge factors and a lot of, worst case scenario tuning. There is always a well-paid human somewhere. Always. You'd be surprised at how many well-paid humans are in place, network engineers are in places you didn't think network engineers went. And they're doing very nicely out of it. I'm not one of them, which is why I'm trying to get them out of a job. People say, yeah, SDN can help. SDN invariably at the moment makes it all worse. I can't tell you why, so please don't beat me up about it. But it's something to do with the methodology that, and I'll come on to it in a second, SDN is quite rightly came out of data center and fixed networks. And it's very easy to go, oh, we can use SDN to solve this problem, so we'll go and get OpenFlow and we'll put all this together and it'll be great. And you turn it on and then just nothing happens. It's a nightmare. And it's got to be fixed because SDN has some huge advantages. And fundamentally, the end user wants to do what he's actually signed up to do. Most of these poor guys who have to use these radio systems in these environments, they wanted to be ambulance paramedics. They wanted to save lives. They didn't want to fiddle with a router. Surely you should care about bandaging and not hello interval timers. So the proposal is with DLEP, you can start to skip out to some of these. You don't need the ARP and neighbor discovery because you can be told your MAC straight off. So we can skip that cycle. You can skip the hello and the dead interval because he's there and his IP address, so crack on. You might actually be able to skip having a routing protocol in some scenarios because DLEP does provide you the possibility for a little stub area network to say, hey, the guy over there, he's got a little /27 network behind him. Just pop that in a table somewhere, just while he's here. It is intentionally not a full routing protocol. Okay, there's no loop avoidance. It's a little stub area. That was an intentional decision because we had to limit the scope of what we were trying to do here. And also you can do things like, and I've covered this before, preload round-trip time estimates for some of the other, transport protocols you're using, because you start to get some idea of latencies and you start to get some idea of what that link will actually manage, which might, get the data moving more efficiently quickly. Yeah, wow. It's all very cool, but I imagine most of you guys don't do anything with radios. So why should you actually care? Well, I'll try and answer that. So I think the reality is everyone in this room is using link layers more complicated than 10-base-T. None of you are using twisted pair anymore. Your link layers in whatever area you actually are enormously complicated. And they're doing stuff you don't realize they're doing, or if they are doing it, you don't seem to be able to ask them what they're doing. Look at layer 2 tunneling. Well, look at any sort of tunneling. That appears to just be a link, but it's doing stuff. any sort of virtual machine networking where you've got, you know, a vSwitch of some sorts in your data center. That's doing loads of stuff, and it knows when links are being configured to come up and come down long before your polling and your pinging and your helloing down the wire comes up. There's an interesting use case in the 3GPP LTE environment. That whole protocol stack does some very clever stuff, and when you're trying to route in a traditional sense across 3GPP networks, you have to treat it as a wire currently. There's no way to query your modem and say, actually, what are you doing? Can I see my base station? Am I moving? You know, what's going on there? 802.11, yeah. We all know what it's like as your signal goes up and down. Get your phone out. You can see the links change. Perhaps we can be smarter about what we do with those links. Not from a router perspective, because people often don't route from their phones, but from an application perspective, there might be an opportunity there. Domestic broadband. I know a lot of people have nice, fast fiber all over the place. I live in a rural area of England where my broadband speed drops every time it rains because the cable runs through a gully which fills with water. So, you know, I have a varying link on what should be an absolutely fixed wire. And DLEP could help with all of these. So, what's next for DLEP? As Alvaro said, we're working on some extensions. So we've got the core protocol, which describes how you have a session between router and radio. So how you can negotiate about what you're going to talk about. You can sort out some basic stuff like, I can see someone, they've gone away again, a destination as we call it in the DLEP terminology, and you can talk about the links to the destinations. We're now starting to address the fact that you might have multiple egress queues in your modem. So perhaps, depending on the size of these queues, the congestion on these queues, you might want to do some flow control, or the router might want to understand that if it's forwarding traffic down via that device, then actually that device's queues are starting to bung up. And based on DSCP code points or something at a different layer, you know, you can queue how you want. You might want to do some flow control on that. Equally, there might be different metrics per queue. So there's some work going on there. We're talking about it in the session after this. Please come along and join in. DLEP does currently, because we were trying to scope it, discuss everything in terms of a single contiguous layer 2 domain. So everything's treated at a layer 2. Obviously, life is a bit more complex than that. There are devices which operate at layer 3, links back into fixed infrastructure where there isn't really another end, but there's definitely an internet there. Isn't handled particularly well by core DLEP, but we've got extensions in place to handle that as well. And people are thinking up of new and exciting metrics that you might want to talk about. DLEP has quite a nice extensions mechanism where instead of having version numbers and constantly revving the draft, there's a way of negotiating what extensions you want to use for the life of the session. So the ability to add extensions and support extensions through different implementations is, we believe, is reasonably simple and extensible. So the other half of what's next is to reach out to you guys to say, we think we've got something bigger than just MANA, and we think it might be of interest to you. The other thing, because this is the IETF, we need to write some Yang models. We do. We've got to be able to manage this somehow. And there's lots of scope for people to write extensions that work for them. You know, DOCSIS. I don't know what the 5G guys are supporting. It would be really interesting to see whether they need some special capabilities or they can provide some capabilities for the use of us on the routing and traffic moving side. Data center guys, you know, virtualization, virtual switching, virtual network substrates, that's interesting stuff. There's got to be the ability to have event-driven link layer notifications. It's you guys have got to be thinking about this already. Let's not reinvent the wheel. We've got something reusable. I think this is my last slide anyway.
Okay. I'm sorry if I interrupted, but Greg Mirsky, ZT. I just wanted to ask, have you looked at the work done on what can be called at links with a variable discrete bandwidth? Namely, it's actually radio links. There was a work done in CCAMP TS and with RCP and IGPT extensions. That's the offer. So I'll
Yeah,
just
we are
let,
the
let
co-authors. Hi, I'm Amy from Huawei. Actually, I work on our microwave, so which is one of the radio technology. So it's very interesting to see your presentation, and but this is my first time to understand that. So I think I might need more time to digest it to see um, how it will change. May have a change on our device because currently in our device we have the complete the layer 3 functions, so we just have that. But from your slides, I see you have a quite different requirements from us. So I think that might be the reason we introduced this additional protocols. Okay. Thank you for the introduction.
It's quite all right. I mean, you're just the sort of people we want to reach out to because we've been in a sort of slightly in the cupboard of Manet. So no one has really seen the work we're doing with this. So that's not half the point of me coming here to tell you about these things. Because I think there probably is crossover because I'm talking to microwave people at the moment, trying to get them to implement DLAP on their microwave radios. But I've got a couple of open questions to fill in. But one of the things I think is relevant, particularly with where you're coming from CCamp, is that DLAP is talking very much about an event-triggered way of driving routing rather than a prescriptive way. So rather than the network controller in some way saying, I need that link budget, I need you to operate in this way as part of my master plan for the network driven by policy, DLAP allows everything to be a bit more autonomous and reactive. And I think that comes from the Manet heritage. So both approaches are probably valid. I don't want to try and say, oh, throw your work away. But I would love to talk to you afterwards about some of this. I can certainly.
Because from your slide, I see a completely different way from us. Then I think maybe there's some points that we could reference from. Anyway, a good presentation.
Come to Manet, and we're going to talk about this for at least another 45 minutes, and probably have an argument as well, which is always worth
I will
it.
check the agenda. So it's already earlier this week.
Next session. Next session.
It's the next session in the Orchard Room at 6:10.
Okay. Thank you.
Justin Dean, the chair of the Manning Working Group. Great presentation.
I haven't quite finished yet.
There was one thing you mentioned that I don't quite agree with, and that is that we've been doing this in isolation. We've been developing it in isolation, but there has been, at least that I know of, 3 different radio vendors that have adopted this and put it into their actual radios. So it's getting some, with development of this, it was always a chicken and egg problem. Like which routers are going to support this, what radios are going to support it, and who's going to want to build something when the other side isn't there, because it's a 2-part system. So now that we're getting some radio vendors to do it, we really want to get some routing people to build their end of it and build it up so that it can explode and be useful for lots of different systems.
I completely agree. I think it's a very valid point. When I said we've been doing it slightly in the cupboard, I meant of the IETF. There's not a lot of exposure within the IETF. We see it from the radio vendors and from the people commissioning systems built with radios. We've hit the tip over point, I'd say. We're now getting people saying, how do I make this work in my kit? You know, people putting it on their marketing material. We do DLAP. And so I agree. It's in industries there. I'm not sure that the IETF hasn't had the exposure.
The second part of that is when we were developing many routing protocols, we would often put in a section saying how you would, outside of discovering your neighbors, how you would bring a link up or down and what the rules are regarding that. But we didn't have anything like DLAP already predefined. We only had independent drivers that people had written for Wi-Fi, and they wanted to do this stuff themselves. Now we have a mechanism that we would have, if we were to design a routing protocol now, we would reference DLAP and we would tell people exactly how it could control it, instead of just saying, if you want to bring a link up, this is how you can do it and the restrictions on what that means. One other final thing I wanted to mention is the radio guys that we deal with often do mesh networking themselves. They do everything at a lower layer. And when I go to them and I say, well, can you turn routing off? They look at me like I have 3 heads. And they don't understand that we don't want it to turn off. I just want to be able to route to, say, another hop, use a different radio system or a different link partway there, and then route around it. And they're not giving, if they don't have DLEP or something like that, I can't get the information out of it to route around a possible problem link in their network when they're just providing the whole mesh for me. So now instead of telling them, hey, turn that off, I don't want your stuff, I can say, well, hey, can you implement DLEP? It's something we can use, and it will enable our system to be much more powerful.
That's me again.
I'm sorry, who are you?
Greg Mirsky, DT. I probably should write it somewhere. There is some extension again, because when we were doing this for the microwave in RCP/IGPTE, learned that 1731 has bandwidth notification extension. And again, might be it's interesting to see, because that will be layer 2 telling layer 3, which was very nice. But again, something to talk about and look whether it's possible to give it there. So then layer 3 doesn't have to be discovering and learn with layer 2, and it just will be a specific, thing. Yeah, it's extension BN bandwidth notification 1731.
Can someone make a note of that so I can look it up? Thank you. Can I just finish my last 2 slides, if that's all right? What I was going to say is the open questions, and we've started to touch on this at the moment, which, from my perspective as one of the DLEP authors, where I think we should start to explore DLEP in a wider area is, how does DLEP play well with SDN? As I said before, DLEP is reactive and is built around that premise of events trickling up from lower layers, allowing upper layers to react. Whereas SDN seems to have a more prescriptive model where high up in the policy architecture, policy flows down from above. So how do these two work together? I'm not sure. BFD is really good, and BFD and DLEP really ought to work together well. And I'd love to find out how to make that happen, because once DLEP has told you a link's there, BFD would do a fantastic job of keeping it alive, or there's some combination that can happen with BFD, and I'd really like to have a conversation with those guys, see what they think about DLEP, and see where the crossover is. I'd also like to talk to the guys involved with OSPF and ISIS and BGP and Babel, and to have some best practices on using DLEP with your protocols would be really interesting for those of us working in the radio areas, but also it might make it might be good for the community as a whole, is the short answer. Also, classic example with the microwave thing, we missed out on that work. We didn't know it was happening. No, that's the truth. So let's fill in that gap. Let's find where the crossover is and find what we should have known earlier. And my last question really is to the chairs: is MANA the right place for DLEP anymore? And that's a question really to the ADs. And that's it. Question.
I got a question. Hi, it's Francisco. Yeah. Sorry, my voice is not what it used to be. It's time to go home, I guess. You mentioned multicast on one of the first slides. So multicast doesn't work so well over wired LANs, right? Have you done any work to make multicast work better here?
Right. DLEP doesn't do anything about wireless LANs. In the DLEP, it's not actually in the document anymore, but for a long time, it used to be referred to as radio magic intentionally. DLEP does not prescribe what the radio does to maintain its link. How the radio system does multicast, that's up to them. And they may want to go and look at some of the work that's happening in PIM or in the other group and take some advice. But DLEP allows a radio system that does do multicast to tell the router on the other end of the DLEP session, and it's just a little local session, this. It doesn't run across the air, I should have mentioned that. To say, hey, I do multicast. Here's a multicast MAC. Start sending traffic that way. I can tell you multicast MAC plus, which multicast groups that applies to. And I can tell you metrics about that. So if my multicast is 10 times slower than my unicast in a sort of 8211 mode, I can tell you that it is slower. So you can decide to throttle your multicast traffic, but we don't try and fix the radio layer. The radio layer, that's a different thing. We're the interface between the two, and we don't prescribe them.
Ice. Almost found the tongue, but there you go. Ice. Okay, I sing. That's. I do want to say that. Yeah, I mean everything Rick said is obviously right, but there is some work that the Money Working Group has done on SMF, whatever, something multicast forwarding, simple multicast forwarding, right? Yeah, for multicast over wireless networks, and actually they do have in their charter right now also an item to work on making that better, right? On I don't know what we call it, advanced multicast or whatever we call it there. Forwarding information, multicast forwarding information or something along those lines. So in any case, yeah, there is work going on there on wireless propagation of multicast, which I know that PIM has also been discussing that, PIM and the MOD, of course.
Exactly. It came up in the PIM working group this week.
Yes, exactly. So yes, there is definitely some connection there. And that same topic that Mike and other people have been talking about in PIM around, or MOD, I don't know where you presented it, around 802.11 and how much it sucks, has been also been discussed in theory and other places as well, right? So yes, but yeah, there's definitely overlap and synergy there that we need to coordinate on.
Hi, Lou Berger. I think it's worth pointing out that DLEP supports radios that have two different service models. It work with radios that have an Ethernet service model or an IP service model. And there's definitely some interesting different use cases of when you'd want one over the other. And I think it's good to understand that.
There's a little bit more work going on to make the IP service model even more usable, but I think we have a solution for that. Come to Mane afterwards, and we can tell you more about that in detail. But thanks.
And with respect to the variable rate that you see on microwaves, and that's been discussed in CCAMP, the DLEP has a sort of different approach. You're not trying to do full optimization across DLEP, and DLEP is just reporting out what bandwidth is available. So if you have a variable rate system, it would report, here's what you have now, and then later on it'll say, here's what you have now that it's gone up or it's gone down, and that's all it's reporting.
Yeah, sorry.
There's no control across down that says switch. You know, let's say a multi-channel with a microwave that can go multiple discrete bandwidth. There's no way for a router to send anything down to the modem. The modem just reports that.
Yeah, Lou's right to clarify that point. DLEP is primarily a reporting protocol. It's not a management protocol. You don't start turning off and turning on features. There's a little bit of can I please have functionality in there, but it's primarily a channel to allow event reporting back up to the router. Anyway.
Yeah, I think actually we can sort of really a good point about SDN, because instead of needing SDN to configure these parameters, you're grabbing them right from the link layer. And so for us in CCAMP, instead of using a controller to provision these, you know, for the OSPF, what it is, you'd be able to use this to just pull it out of the link layer.
And particularly with you see a sort of feedback loop where your controller or your configuration may configure the link layer and say, I need this, I need 173 megabits. And the reality of the atmospherics is that actually you only get 120. But with DLEP, you get told it's only 120. You don't just read the config file and say, oh, it's 173. It's not.
And for those that are just going to say quick from CCAMP, you may remember the link management protocol, which has something called LMP. But there you're managing the link itself at that layer. So when it was Sonnet, you were or SDH, you're configuring the SDH itself for the GM4S, that link layer. Whereas this is grabbing it from the other layer.
So my previous life we built OSPF microwave networks using traffic engineering extensions to signal the bandwidth available, and if modulation changes, we would just update it. So if you look at modern HDN architecture, most probably you would have BGP less northbound. You report this to the controller. So extensions are in place. However, timing could be critical. It takes time to redistribute stuff, to send it north, and BGP takes time. So you might need to look into timing issues and how real time you want to be.
Would you like to come and help us do that?
Potentially.
Thank you.
Lou Berger again. I'd like to go back to what Deborah talked about with LNP. I got originally associated with DLEP because I was assigned as a reviewer because I had worked on LNP. It really is just LNP developed from a different group and with a different market sector. It's really just LNP for a different market sector. Had we known about each other, we probably could have just done one protocol, and it's a little unfortunate. This protocol has been developed very richly for one application. LNP still is really very niche. It still exists and it's used for very limited applications. This one seems to be growing a little bit more, but they really are morally equivalent protocols.
Thanks, Rick. So as we said at the beginning, and as Lucia said, this protocol we think is growing. We think there's applicability outside of MANET. And to Rick's last question there, what do we do? Is MANET really the place? We've been thinking about different things. We would spin this off somewhere so that a wider audience comes. We would leave it there, and you come to MANET or whatever. Things along those lines. If you have any thoughts about that, please let us know. You don't have to let us know now, but please let us know what do you think. And again, at 6:10 tonight in the Orchard room, it's the MANET meeting. So now that everyone knows DLAP, you can come over and so we're going to continue. John is going to give us a quick overview of the routing directorate report, and then we're going to go into the working group reports. You guys know that if you didn't fill out the wiki, in case you want to do it right now, we're going to do public shaming, of course, as it's traditional now. I'm going to shame myself first. And I didn't have to fill the wiki, so I'm okay. But I said before that we didn't have any new chairs. And I sort of lied because we actually do have 2 new chairs because we had a BOF. So Victor and Gunter, who are sitting there, they're kind of hiding. They can stand up and say hello, and they chaired the DC routing BOF yesterday. I thought they did a great job, so thank you for that.
Hello. To report on the activities of the routing directorate for the last period, I'm John Hardwick, and the other coordinator of the routing directorate is Amy. Whereabouts are you, Amy? This is Amy. Amy is also one of the coordinators. So it turns out most of you are working group chairs, so I'm sure you will know what the role of the routing directorate is. So I've presented this slide plenty of times before. The real point of this slide really is to point out the 4th bullet. That the routing directorate are all awesome people. They're awesome because, firstly, they are experts. Hello? Closer? Is better? In my mouth? Okay. The routing directorate, yeah, they're awesome people. They're awesome because they are experts and they are able at a moment's notice to just review any routing directorate draft that I throw at them, and that's amazing to have. And even more amazingly, they do it completely for free. And we all get great value out of that. So thanks to all the 46 current members of the directorate for all the work you do. Yeah, the work that the routing directorate do is primarily reviewing drafts, drafts either from inside the routing area or even outside the routing area. Anything that has routing significance, they can end up reviewing. There are 2 styles of review. There's either the review that gets done close to our or at IETF last call, where really they're the guardians of quality. They're to spot any issues. It's like the last chance to fix. So you have a pair of wise eyes looking at the draft. It's really good to have that. But also they do early reviews earlier on in the draft's life. Usually on special request from a working group chair who thinks another pair of eyes on the draft would be of value before it goes too far down the publication process. So I mean both reviews can happen. From time to time, also the ADs use the directorate to make judgment calls or to get advice on particular issues. You can read more about them at the wiki. So onto the stats. I always run through a few stats of the routing directorate, and it's the end of the year, so I'm going to recap the stats for the whole of the last year. So first of all, the bar chart on the left, that shows routing directorate reviews that we did. I've broken it down into the 3 different IETF meeting cycles in 2017. The tall blue columns are the sum of the orange and grey columns. So the tall blue columns is the total number of reviews we did. The orange columns are the last call reviews, and the grey column is the early reviews. I think we see that the number of reviews that we get to do is variable. The graphs show it dropping over the course of the year, but that's just kind of random fluctuation, I think. We got a fairly steady load of reviews coming from the area directors. That's a fairly constant stream. The number of early reviews we get asked to do depends on what the working groups are doing at any particular moment. We didn't get so many in the last period. We've got quite a lot more during the start of the year. So I mean that adds up to, I don't know, something close to 100 reviews that we did during the course of a whole year. So I guess with 46 people in the directorate, that's about 2 reviews each. So we're not overly burdened. The right-hand bar chart shows where the reviews are coming from, and I've broken it down basically by working group to show you which working groups give us the most work. But also, you can see the top line there is drafts coming from outside the area. I mean, that's the biggest single category, but they can come from everywhere else in the IETF, so it's maybe not surprising that there are more of those. And then within the routing area, the bar chart shows basically the breakdown between who's giving us early reviews versus where the last call reviews are coming from. You can see that some working groups are really keen on getting early reviews of their documents. Some working groups just never seem to want that, but that's fine. It's entirely up to the chairs whether they think it's going to provide value. So the last time I presented stats, I got asked a few questions I couldn't answer about the outcomes of the reviews and what do the outcomes look like for in-area drafts versus out-area drafts. So I did those stats for you. Pie chart on the left. These are the last call results for routing area drafts. And we can see that 13% were just ready, no problems. 27% had nits. 57% had issues, where issues kind of is a bit of a subjective term, but it kind of means things we really should fix. And 3% of the drafts were not ready to publish. And then the pie chart on the right shows the same, but for drafts from outside the area. And we see there's more drafts were ready, fewer drafts had nits, fewer drafts had issues, but not significantly fewer. I think all these really show us are that routing experts are better at finding issues in routing drafts, which is completely unsurprising. But what it also shows us is that routing experts are actually pretty good at finding issues in non-routing drafts, which is great, and I think really backs up the value of having this review. So, I mean, that's the end of the update. I think I'm looking forward to the work continuing next year and helping up the level of quality on more drafts. Has anyone got any questions or points they want to raise about the directorate?
Well, thank you, John, and thank you to everyone who participates in reviewing in the directorate. You really help us make all documents have better quality. Thank you so much. So now we're going to come to the much-awaited part of the agenda, which is the working group summary. So you know the drill. We're gonna start from the top again, and you can all spell, so you be ready for when your letter comes up. So we're gonna start with Babel.
Hi, this is Donald Eastlake with Huawei. I think we've made a lot of progress moving the Babel RFCs to from standards from experimental to standard track. So particularly the base standard RFC 6126, including extension mechanism, is in working group last call right now, and I think it's in great shape, except possibly for security. But other than that. We'll be discussing at the Babel meeting, which will be the next slot after this one.
Yes.
Martin speaking. On a pretty calm inter-meeting period, honestly, with only one new RFC and a couple of adoptions. Thank you. One point though, yeah, I've written it here, is that, and we've discussed that with Matthew, is that we expect a tightened relationship with NVO3 on the control plane solutions in support of what has been happening recently in NVO3.
I've Rashad here. We didn't meet at IETF 100, but we need to make progress on some documents. We're going to meet in London. So I have an excuse why we didn't update the agenda. RFC 8279 has been published. We have the beer architecture out. We were out and down until 3 a.m. I lost his voice. My co-chair missed in action. So the architecture's out, MPLS encapsulation is in editor's queue. We have a bunch of things ready for last call. Stuff is coming in with pretty good clip. I think we'll need to recharter, a lot of overlay, some underlay suggestions. That's about the status. And I swear once I found my dead co-chair, he'll update the page.
So yeah, please do update it. I understand that if there's a serious rush to update the wiki at the very last instant, people can overwrite each other's summaries. But just to touch briefly on the Bureau recharter, Bureau expecting to work on a document that explains sort of the applicability, and the current charter is experimental with a draft that needs to get done to change. And I'm hoping, because I'm a wide-eyed optimist, to have that rechartered so that it'll be standards track before I step down. And congratulations on the first RFC. That's awesome.
See, and that was honest. I could have told you that the dog ate the entry, right?
Dogs are not very hungry for electronic bits.
Daniele Ceccarelli for CCamp. We had a session on Tuesday. We are seriously considering going for 2 sessions at the next meeting because we had 23 drafts discussed and it was a rush rather than a session. We used to have 2 design teams. We closed the one on microwave, but we would be happy to work with Manet on microwave if needed. The design team delivered what they were asked for. We have a framework document and young models for microwave nodes. The second design team on transport as NBI is delivering as well. We have 3 drafts describing use cases and the gap analysis against the existing solutions in IETF and outside of the IETF. Young models, we have plenty of them, optical, flexigrid, IP over WDM, OTN, microwave, and so on. And some new work. We have beyond the 100 gigabit OTN, Flex Ethernet, young model for client layer topologies, client layer tunnels, optical transport network client signals. Summary of the status, we have 1 draft in the editor queue. We have 1 draft in the ISP processing, and we before the IETF we did the IPR polling for a number of drafts, but didn't want to start the polling because people were super busy with slide preparation, meeting preparation. So we'll kick them off after the.
So just to cover the DC routing BOF, first of all, a lot of really good participants. Everyone's very easy to work with and got everything shuffled together well. Now going into it, we had a key question we were trying to answer on behalf of the overall IETF and the ADs, which is, does it make sense for the IETF to increase focus in on the DC route and DC fabric area? So we want to try to understand. So then as we focus in on things, it was provide you guys the input in this developing area, right? What's going on there. Discover, are there requirements or characteristics here that, around routing, management, resiliency, programming, that would drive us to do new work. And, but it was also not the intention necessarily for the BOF to, directly translate into a general routing working group, a working group for DC routing, but try to discover what's going on here. So some of the highlights, requirements discussion, there was some good conversation around that. The goal there was to kind of find leading indicators, right? Is there something here to be focusing on? There was a growing understanding that there were a number of interesting requirements and characteristics there, but also not to try to boil the ocean in this topic area, right? It's obviously easy to have done that, or could be easy to do that. Growing understanding of the problem space might be too large for a single solution specifically, so there might be room for additional solutions. Feedback from the room shows that there was a lot of desire for folks to participate in potential work. We reviewed some new potential solution work, as well as reviewed some of the existing work going on in other working groups there. So that's some of the key highlights.
I'm gonna scroll so I can see it. Thanks. So we're working on getting our foundational drafts done. We had adopted a data plane draft between last IETF and this IETF, and there were some issues noted in the draft, and I think we made good progress this week on discussion of some of the issues and building some consensus on them. So I think that's going well. We also had good agreement during the meeting to send the DetNet flow information model draft to an adoption call. So we'll be doing the IPR call and then the adoption call on that. And we're beginning work on the node and service parameter definition for the basis for the Yang model. So that's basically it for the week. We are trying to figure out if we can manage the logistics of doing a face-to-face interim meeting, because we feel we're at a point where that would help in the progress on these drafts, and but logistics are not easy on that. So probably we'll be taking that to the list.
I2S is wrapping its work and heading toward a hiatus. We've done working group last calls on a few on topology L3 and rib drafts that have been in NDA form, and today we sent forth the topology drafts, the base and the L3, to the ISG again. To celebrate this, I wrote a little poem, so if you're interested, take a look and see. Yes, I do have other talents in life besides reviewing drafts. We plan to work in group last call the following modules in the next 6 weeks. We would love comments: the L2 topology, the filter-based rib, and the DC network topology. Our last remaining piece of work is to complete the ephemeral data store. We took one pass. I had tremendously good feedback from all the NetMod folks. Again, we are grateful for all their help. And we're moving one piece of work over to the RTWG. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Chris. They did that this afternoon. There was a BNG split model, which was fairly interesting, where they're doing next generation BNGs where the edge needs to be light, and they're putting functions in perhaps the data center or someplace in the network. It was a really interesting thing because they would spawn up additional user agents or additional management. This made it a really good case for the dynamic data store. I wish you enjoying that. I'll be there to try to help you with it. So we're pleased. Since I'm in IDR next, it's always good to have one thing. By the way, I2S, IDR, and Trill all met on Monday. I had a wonderful Monday. IDR is considering BGP LS, congested related communities, and the BGP NMDA model. That's the network management data store architecture gang model. We will probably be releasing the NMDA model within 2 weeks with a dependency on the routing policy. The LS additions included entropy labels, PC discovery, and IP segment routing and service chaining. Someone asked me an interesting question at IDR. They said, when you approve BGP-LS, did you would think you would become the BGP-LS working group? I said that was fun, but we'll pass. I did ask the BGP-LS how they would maintain all this information in the data and how they did their traffic studies. They thought I was crazy at first because they just thought they'd send a little piece of information. However, sometimes I have a crystal ball.
So just thinking about the Sue tripping over NMDA, which I also do. Is it pronounceable NIMDA, or I mean maybe we should. Hard to say. So ISIS, we met together with OSPF for the trial of merging the two. We've been running with merged lists. There's still some, positive, a few negatives, but mostly positive, and as you heard, everyone's going to do it. So other than that, we also we have a draft stuck in this rough, and we have sort of a controversy going on about how to signal enablement of TE protocols, and also how to differentiate the data between the TE data.
we should have that resolved by the next meeting.
Okay, at least my LPTP EXT, even though they're not meeting, they were very good. They filled out the wiki, which you can see some people did not. But anyway, they are not meeting, and they have been somewhat dormant. But they did finish their IPv6 work, and they have a Yang model that's in their active queue. It kind of died, and now it's active again. But anyway, that's about it. So they're mostly just working on the mailing list. Lists.
Hi. So we are meeting tomorrow. We have a pretty packed agenda. So because a few new use cases are popping up. News, we have two new working group items on EID anonymity and a new type of LCAP, which is economical form to encode addresses. Okay. Most important working item will still be the two BIS documents to move forward as a standard track risk solution. Other news is the fact that we actually had the security draft out for IETF last call, and it came back. Came back not because of technical issues, it's just because the charter that we have now is for publish standard track documents. And actually that one was still experimental, kind of because we started the work with the previous charter, which was experimental solution. So rightfully they said, yeah, take it back, publish as a standard track. So what we do, we will keep it a little bit in the working group. We will move forward the standard track basic specification and then push it just behind, making sure that it's coherent with the new documents. Okay.
Manny working group is meeting right after this one. We're doing a lot of DLAP work. You heard the presentation, so I won't go over all of that again. But we will be going over multiple extensions to DLAP and looking for new people that are excited about working on that. We will also probably be talking about whether the Manny working group wants to keep DLAP work within the Manny group, or depending on the feedback from you all, if it moves out of the Manny working group and how that works. We wrapped up most of the other work, almost all of the other work that we had ongoing. You can scroll. DLAP was published. We didn't meet at 99. DLAP was published between 98 and this one. We got security threats for OSR, and we got multipath for OSR, and we got a packet BB usage, which I believe another routing protocol is going to be using that now. That's going to be published soon, ABBV2, which was in the Manny working group, but is going to be published outside of it. But the packet BB usage came out of the work from the second routing protocol that used it. And we will probably be talking about what we're going to do with the Manny working group, since all of the active work is now kind of finished, other than DLAP. That depends on what happens with DLAP. And what we're chartered to do is the multicast forwarding information-based stuff, and we haven't had a lot of progression on that issue. So something to talk with Alvaro and the working group about that.
So Nicola Lemon for MPLS. We had a meeting on Tuesday, which was quite packed, room and agenda. We have 5 new RCs since the last IETF, which is quite a lot for us. Usually we are more between 2 and 3. There are also 3 new working group documents, and we have 4 errata since last IETF. 2 new liaison statements. One is from BDF and one is from ITU. And there are also 6 missing progress reports for existing working group documents, and we will work on that together, I guess, with the responsible people for the documents. One topic which is not mentioned is that we are also currently looking into MD5 usage in LDP. We are addressing that together with SEC chairs and also with parts.
Okay, so MVO3, we met yesterday afternoon. Had a pretty packed agenda. Again, we've recently selected a standards track encapsulation, which is Genève. But we've got increasing focus, I think, on security and OEM support for Genève in the working group. No new RFCs since the last IETF, and 1 document with the RFC editor. We're really hoping to send Genève to the ISG pretty soon, but we really need a little bit more progress, I think, on security. And we're also going to initiate some security and transport area reviews with that. On the OEM side, there's quite a few new proposals for OEM related to Genève, but I think we need to see a little bit of stability in the Genève header before we send it to ISG review. So we would really like to at least resolve the impact of OEM on Genève first. We've also made some progress on control plane. So I have an applicability statement for EVPN, which is obviously related to the closer work that we'll be doing with BESS that Martin mentioned earlier on. The control plane aspects that we're really chartered for doing new protocol work in, which is a centralized control plane. We're kind of looking for some work on Yang models for Genève. We have one for earlier encapsulations, I think the XLAN GPE, but we really need some contribution for Yang models related to managing networks with Genève. Good.
OSPF.
We met this morning, AC Lindum, Cisco Systems. We met this morning, and as Chris mentioned, we had a joint meeting with ISS for the first time. We're talking about formalizing that and what the charter would look like. We don't have any new RFCs. We have some waiting on references. Some of the things that are highlights is we're pretty much done with the OSPF V2 segment routing, and we're waiting on some of the other spring documents to go through. So those will go to the ISG as one. The OSP3 extended LSAs is between the working group last call. We have a shepherd, and we're going to push that through the process as quickly as possible. As far as work in progress, we have the OSPF V2, OSPF Yang model covered both V2 and V3. That is, we requested the Yang doc to review. It's NDMA compatible, compiles, and we'd like to get some people to review it. We have a design team that worked on it. We're all reviewing it. And other than that, we have a lot of maintenance enhancements work. Just possibly, we're going to do some work on security. We talked about having a document containing just OSPF security considerations. That's it.
So if I can, really quick, you mentioned segment routing, waiting for the main drafts. Yeah. So I was just going to say that
they have normative references to like.
No, I understand. So I'm just going to say that December 14th is when the segment router architecture and the use cases and everything else is scheduled for the IAG Teltap.
Okay.
So that was the big bottleneck. The bottleneck was me, and so now we should be ready to go.
Excellent.
So the good news there, the OSPF1 will go on to the same telechat. If the ISIS segment routing document happened to be ready to go at the same time, I would cheer.
Andy Mellis for PALS. We met on Monday afternoon. In fact, we met at the last session of the day, which worked out well because we ended up going over by about half an hour. so we may end up asking for an hour and a half next time. The primary focus of the working group, it continues to be fixing problems that have been seen in the field with Ethernet pseudowires, with Ethernet frames arriving out of order because either implementations or operators have not been using the control word, or when they have been using the control word, we've now found that there are some router implementations that actually do deep packet inspection past the control word. If they see the control word, they assume it's an Ethernet pseudowire, which it may not always be. There are other kinds of pseudowires, and they look down 12 bytes further past what they assume would be the Ethernet header to do ECMP based upon what they're assuming is an IP header. That may not always be the case. So they're doing, in a lot of cases, they're doing ECMP incorrectly. So what we're going to be doing is adding advice in the draft to say basically don't do that. And there are much better ways to do ECMP on pseudowires. And we also plan to send a liaison to our SDO partners that make use of pseudowires. If you can scroll up a bit. Other way. Thank you. Next, we have one draft in the IESG review, which has been stalled on the issue of LDP security, which the working group chairs in the routing area talked about on Wednesday morning. So we're working with the MPLS chairs to get this fixed in the MPLS working group. Plus, we've reissued a new revision of this draft to say that that there are changes to LDP security coming up, and this draft will take advantage of them when they are available. And hopefully, that'll clear the path to the IESG review. And if you just scroll a bit more. So we've had 2 new RFCs since the last IETF. We've been keeping Deborah very busy. We've had 16 RFCs published in the last 2 years. We have one more that's in the RFC editor's queue. As I said, there's one in IESG review. And right now, the Ethernet control word draft is our last active working group draft. We may end up with another one coming out of DetNet, depending on what happens with the data plane draft there. So we may end up with one more draft. If not, we'll be talking with Deborah about the future of the working group.
John Hardock for PCE. So we met on Monday. We have one really major milestone. We published the stateful PCE extensions, which is great. I think I've been standing here for the last 2 years saying we're about to publish these, and now we have. So I did a little dance when that happened, and I don't aim to reproduce that here. We also published secure PCE, so also known as PCPS, also known as PCP over TLS, which is also really important because now we can secure our PCE sessions properly. 2 other RFCs published since the last IETF. One to optimize LSP state synchronization between the server and the network. One for service-aware LSPs. And we're making lots of other progress on several fronts now that stateful PCE is published. We can look forward to an avalanche of RFCs coming after that. We have 3 with the RFC editor right now, 1 with IESG, and 4 have just come past working group last call. So what we're working on right now is, now we have a stateful PCE tool in the bag. We're going to apply that in lots of different directions to lots of different TE applications associated with bidirectional LSPs, providing end-to-end protection with PCE, scheduling LSP setup with the stateful PCE, and new work coming in is, and this is quite interesting, is an application for the stateful PCE as a central controller for the network. So it's sort of taking the next logical step beyond path instantiation and positions the PCE to act more like it's a controller using PCEP as a southbound interface to the network devices to set up the paths. And that's it.
Mike McBride for PIM. We met on Tuesday morning with MBOND, which is the operational side of multicast, which, by the way, has been a very successful experiment meeting back to back with them. And it's no longer an experiment. We're just going to keep doing it going forward. We just share the 2.5 hours. Sometimes one working group has more time than the other, and it works out quite well. We are making good progress with the riveting topic of Yang models for PIM and IGP and MD. It is very important work that we joke about it. And there's been a lot of good people making some good progress. We did request publication for PIM Yang, which has been updated with compliance with NMDA. We've made some good progress with some designated router related work, and some non-PIM related work continues to be presented at PIM for PIM expertise, being that PIM is protocols for IP multicast and not protocol independent multicast working group. We are open to different multicast related protocols, and we've had publication requested for a couple drafts. We will continue to work on Yang models and work on improvements to PIM, IGMP, and MLD as it makes sense.
Yeah, Peter van der Stok for Roll. Roll is sparkling with new ideas, and there's also lots of requests coming in from 6TiSH, which we can understand because they extensively use our Ripple protocol, and this makes me very happy. But we have a reduced set of active members, so we have to make choices and see how to go forward. So we want to spend 2 meetings next time, one having the regular role meeting and other one in which we discuss the progress and see how we make priorities and choices about the way forward. I think that is in short how we are doing. Thank you. Young. Yeah, okay. We have one young model, but that's slowly not going forward. There is one person interested. That's me, and I hope to get more active members for that. Okay.
Chris Bowers for the routing area working group. The 2 main themes are that the initial wave of Yang models is finishing up. The first wave had keychains, VRP, RIP, routing types, etc. There's a potential second wave of individual drafts coming in for RIB and QoS and policy, and probably proxy ARP. And the routing area Yang design team is disbanding after accomplishing their mission. The other theme is sort of traditional routing area working group, distributed routing, microloop prevention solutions. 2 of them are on their way, I believe. One is already in the ISG, the local delay solution. One is nearing working group last call. And there are also 2 potential tunneling solutions that are individual drafts. SFC.
Hi, Tom Mizrahi. So SFC met on Tuesday this week, and first of all, good news, NSH was approved for publication. So that was the main focus of the last few months. The authors did some awesome job there. Some more stuff, there was some progress on OEM. The OEM framework document has made some progress. And also there was quite a bit of discussion in the working group about OEM, SFC OEM, in-situ OEM, alternate marking. And in the next few weeks, probably we're going to see some more discussions about rechartering. The working group chairs met with the ADs this week and talked about rechartering. And there was a bit of discussion about that in the working group meeting this week, and probably going to continue on the mailing list in the next few weeks. Thanks.
Thanks, Cal.
So unfortunately, this is probably the last time that I get to shame the CIDR working group for not filling out the wiki. I think Sandy is not here, and Chris, I don't know, he's probably out celebrating a beer. CIDR didn't meet this time, as if you've been paying attention to this, they have one draft left that is a working group last call right now. And as soon as that gets published, we're going to close the working group. For those of you who care about CIDR, don't despair. We have a CIDR Ops working group that has been meeting regularly already.
Martin speaking for Spring. So we didn't meet last time, and so many people complained that we felt, well, SR was still interesting. So we decided to meet. We're seeing the end of the tunnel. Thank you, Alvaro, for that, for the batch of 8 documents we sent to IESG. And thank you for the thorough reviews, because I guess that was really helpful. And one document is nevertheless returning to the working group. And we see new topics emerging. These are clearly controversial. Service training, path identification, and so on. So it's promising interesting discussions between the ADs and between the working group chairs on how to make sure the work fits in the right working group. And in any case, we'll be having a rechartering discussion in spring, because for the moment, we're not allowed to cover these topics. Status, nearly 0 everywhere. One working group, let's go. Thank you.
Pawan Biram for TEAS. Quick highlights. The base Yang modeling work is slowly starting to wind down. The T topology model, we had the working group last call complete for that. There is one issue pending, and after that, I guess we would be able to take it to put in a publication request for it. The T RSVP models are now NMDA compliant. Some of those are more mature than others. We should be able to take those to the next step sooner than later. In terms of ACTN, we are about to commence last call for the initial set of documents, the framework requirements, and the info model drafts. We also did some work for SR-RSVP coexistence. The last call for that is complete, and we should be able to take it to the next step soon. We have 2 new RFCs. There's one in the RFC address queue. There are 5 that are in the post-publication request stages, and 2 new adoptions.
Trill. Trill is in the process of completing its charter work. Yes, I have 2 working groups that are completing their charter work. I'm always happy to see that happen. As a result, Trill will be forwarding 15 plus documents and 3 Yang documents within probably the next 2 months. That means if you are on the routing directorate, please review the Trill documents and give us feedback. Remember that if you're an ISIS expert or an OSPF expert, you'll recognize things. We're closing out in these documents additions for directory, assistance mechanism. You will recognize if you're an ISIS or an OSPF person, multi-topology, multi-level. You will be interested in ECM technology and group key. And yes, if I'm trying to sell you on reviewing these documents, please. We have 3 at the ISG, 4 in Shepherd review, 3 in working group last call, 5 in working group last call review, as well as the 3 Yang models be rewritten for NMDA. And do we think Aaliyah will sleep as she reviews all of these? We're not sure, but we greatly appreciate those who will help us with the reviews and our swamp baby.
Thanks, Sue. So the thing that you missed is the Trill documents are really well written, and it's very easy to do quick reviews, and they're extremely clear. So it's a fast review. I really appreciate that.
So we still have another 12 minutes or delightful time together. If anyone has any other things you want to talk to Mike, please, now is the time.
If not, just a couple quick plugs related to research pieces. There's the Path Aware Networking Research Group, which met in the previous session, and which some of what they're talking about really does relate to routing, and it would be really nice to have a larger routing presence there to help inform and improve some of the discussion. And also related to the IRTF, the ANRW, for those of you in the research area or near universities or knowing folks who might be interested, the Applied Network Research Workshop, which is going to be in Montreal for IETF 102, is open for papers. So thank you very much. Oh, and if there's, yeah, so thank you very much. So are there any other comments or thoughts to things to talk about? So let me ask a couple questions because it is Thursday and I am filled with idle curiosity. How many of you, one second, then I'll get, how many of you are active in any of the open source projects that are relating to networking? How many of you have never heard of any of the open source projects that are related to networking? Okay. How many of you have ideas on how we could do better interaction? And how many of you think that there's technology that's being developed elsewhere that would be useful to be better aware of? Yes, because we tend to be very inwardly focused, and I'd like to fix that. I don't have a lot of time, though, so you're going to have to do it instead. So, please.
I just want to make an observation. There's Justin Dean. It seemed like there were two different groups or two different sets of groups of working groups that met together this go around, and they both said positive things about it. I don't know if that's something that we're looking to do more of or less, or what people's experiences are in the past with that working out well or poorly. I just wanted to.
I think it's, the experience shows it's working out great. In fact, not only OSPF and ISIS, PIM and M1D, but I know in the past TCCamp and MPLS have had joint sessions as well as they find common work, right? So I think MPLS, CCamp, and TC was a lot around all the Yang models and things along those lines. What? I said Yang, but whatever. MPLS, CCamp, T's, right? So yes, I think that one thing that we're always trying to look at is what are common topics. We talk about DLAP, right, which we think is a common topic. When I asked the question about multicast, right, there's multicast work being done or chartered in Manet. There's, of course, the PIM working group. There's beer, right? There's all types of, I think, opportunities to do that. But what I think we need to do is, if we're going to have a joint meeting, I think we're all for that. We need to just plan ahead, right? So that we get the time, the appropriate time, and we get the coordination done for the meeting. But yes, definitely.
And just to amplify, remember there are virtual interims, so it doesn't have to be a joint meeting that's happening here, though we're certainly open to that. I mean, the working groups are a management device, but the conversations need to happen across communities, and we want to make sure that all of the communities of interest for particular topics do have a chance to get involved.
From routing working group, we are still looking and to bring in new work, new interesting work you might be interested in. So this
IETF at Yari talking about network virtualization. I was thinking maybe to do the presentation myself about multi-access edge computing next IETF. If you have topics you think that would be interested, something that we might not be aware of, something we contribute to, please let Chris and myself know, and we'll be more than happy to accommodate you, just to extend what we are doing.
And just to follow up on the open source, as you know, we had the hackathon here, and we really, the ISG would like to encourage more use of the hackathon. So if you have anything at all, you know, we encourage you to do it. My groups, CCamp and PCE, have been really good and pleased, you know, to use that. So I think even this time they had nothing this time. Last time they got the award even. So really encourage, if you have anything, try to make use of that.
Rick Taylor. I was at the Open Source Summit and Linux Containers Conference in Prague a couple of weeks ago, and it was very interesting. It's great to see what all the Linux and FOSS guys are doing, but they do have a general assumption that the network just works. Yeah, it's just, and then we just use the network, and it's brilliant. So there's got to be an opportunity to educate them slightly, because they kind of live at they're 7 down to 5, and then the magic happens. So it's kind of, if anyone's listening, we need to educate them a little bit.
So I'm really happy that you got there, but I think we also need to be educated.
Oh, absolutely. It's a two-way street.
Yes.
They can educate us on the buffet food. It was in the Prague Hilton like ours, and their food was better, but our beards are better.
There's always lots of topics to learn about. Okay, thank you all very much for coming. Hope you have a great rest of IETF 100. Though, of course, the best part's done now. Well, except for Babel and Mine and all of the other ones. And Liz, I only know my schedule.